Welcome back, climbers. I'm your co-host, Kaleigh Floyd, and this is another episode of Climbing Mount CMMC. In today's episode, we're getting real about the cost of a CMMC journey. Now, we are going to talk about our personal journey today in hopes that it will help you on yours. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy today's episode. Hello, climbers. Today we are going to be talking about a very exciting topic. I'm very thrilled to start our series, Let's Get Real, with talking about cost. Okay, so today we're going to get real about the cost of your CMMC journey. Now, we are not claiming CMMC Bible here. We are not CMMC Jesus, so we don't know everything. But what we do know is what we went through as a company. Right. And we're hoping that that can help you guys in your journey, maybe learn a little bit more from our mistakes and the things that we might have done well. So we're going to talk about 3 specific areas that we feel like we could really break out cost. And that first area is scoping and design. Right. The second area is the actual implementation. And then the third is the maintenance of it all. So, Bobby, I really want you to talk about first the reason why we felt like we needed to break up costs into those 3 categories.
Yeah, I think it's important to kind of realize that, over your journey, it's not like buying a new car where you can just be like, okay, I'm gonna have this balloon payment and then amortize it over the course of 5 years and you're good, right? It doesn't work that way. You're going to have this ebb and flow of potential costs. So we broke it down into those 3 sections because I feel like those will have an impact of the ebb and flow of your potential exposure and cost, whether it be a maintenance type cost or it might be a capital type cost where you're having stuff up front. So, and so part of the reason that I think that people want to do is they just want to put it all into one nut. And say, well, what do I have to pay? Just tell me the number.
That sounds really easy.
Right.
Nice.
Yeah. And
there's a reason. I think there's a reason too why we called this podcast Mount CMMC and not casual walk through the forest of CMMC.
Right. And I'm definitely not CMMC Jesus, and I know you're not either. But I love that analogy. The reality is, that first part, Corinne did such a good job when we had her on earlier in our series, and you haven't checked out that episode, definitely check out that one. Also, Amira also covered scoping. She actually brought out Paint and talked about it. So
Microsoft Paint, gotta love it.
It's a glorious thing. And if you've not engaged with Amira with Paint involved, you're missing out.
I agree.
So shout out to you, Amira, on your paint skills. You really need to sit down and look at your design, okay? And so that infers some of the stuff that we'll be talking about in the future, which is knowledge. That's going to require you to have knowledge to understand your design about what you want to have and what you want to build so that you can operate and function. There's a lot of solutions out there that'll just kind of be the cookie cutter, like let's kind of build an enclave. But if you got manufacturing, other types of things, your data is right next to you. We're talking elbows, just rubbing and getting in there and trying to get stuff to work. You've got PLCs and other devices that are trying to work. That's the reality, right? So this beautiful virtual environment just doesn't really work in real life. So you've got to think about your design, and that cost of design and architecture takes money. Right. Yeah. So you want to talk with the CCA. They charge well over $300 an hour. And you want to spend probably a few days of going through the architecture and working through how you want to do it. Now, you could, engage a consulting company that could do it for you. But I would suggest talking and engaging with a C3PO organization. Spend that money to get with them to help get an idea of how you want to do it. Then find a company that could help you implement it, or in having that engagement with a third-party company that understands, that talks about design and scope. That has the power of allowing you to have somebody to kind of turn and talk to saying, hey, this is what the managed service provider that I picked is kind of saying. Does that sound okay? It's not that you're trying to create conflict, but there's so much writing in your implementation. You want to make sure that whatever solution you decide to go down, you're not going to have to double back. You don't want any dead end roads, because that is
your
not
foundation, right?
Absolutely. Your scoping is so critical. You got to get that right. Yes. So getting your scoping, you're looking at several days at $300 an hour of going through and talking with the consultant. That kind of gives you a general idea of what your general design costs might cost you to do that. Now, a lot of people kind of want to think about what the reoccurring maintenance costs are. So that's the third thing that you wanted to talk about, but let's put something out front. What we found in the maintenance type processes, that if you're a well-run organization, that you have good technical processes already before you've started down your CMMC journey, you can usually take your budget, if you're doing it right, some assumption here, okay? Don't come at me, is about 3 times what you're paying, is what we've been seeing. Now, if you haven't been doing patching, you don't have someone who's looking at those types of things, you don't have the right solutions in place, then of course mileage varies dramatically.
Yeah. Right. So I'm glad that you said that at first, because I think, that is a very, very big number. That's not something to take lightly. And that is the third thing that we're talking about. So just like you were saying in the analogy in buying a car, there's not necessarily an end. There's phases, and that maintenance continues on. So, although scoping and design, hopefully when you lay that foundation correctly, you don't have to double back, like Bobby was saying, and come back to it, that it is laid correctly so it stays there in place. But that maintenance piece is,
it's there to stay.
It's going to stay. And that doesn't end. So I do think that was great to start off this, this is a marriage, and we're going back to it. Here we go. Yeah. But it's not going to end if you do it correctly, So I really do think that if you're listening to this and you are taking it seriously, let's start off with that. Let's get that out of the way, and then let's talk about them more in detail. So I love that you said that. So to get
real specific, kind of that pre-scoping, you want to allocate between $3,000 to $10,000 at least in cost. Could be more, but in a minimum, I would say a good starting point is at least $10,000 in trying to calculate your design, talking with professionals, really understanding how that's going to go. Then you get into, how do I get this beautiful, Eiffel Tower or, Statue of Liberty type Golden Gate Bridge design that you just sort of architected out on paper? How do you make it a reality? And that's where the 6-figure costs, a lot of times you see people come in. That's when you're into the actual implementation of the design that you just talked about.
Right.
And it gets pretty darn expensive. If you come out with real capital cost of less than 6 figures, you're doing pretty freaking amazing.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening is probably your biggest cost is going to be people.
Yeah.
The people and their time that they're going to spend in doing the things that you need to have done. So what does that mean? So let's break it into 2 different categories. Okay, Kaleigh? So let's say that you've got on the left hand over here an organization that wants to do it themselves. And then on the right hand, you have someone that's going to outsource to try to find an organization or organizations to help them sort of get it there. And those are 2 different approaches.
Yeah.
Option A, if you're going to do it yourself, you have to pay for the cost of the education. Right? You either need to have somebody inside your organization that you've spent time and money and invested in them to go get CCP trained, go to get CCA trained, involved in the environment. That's going to take time to get them ramped up. Or you can go headhunt. Find someone that already has the knowledge, hire them and bring them into your company. Now, if you're a 20 or 30 person company, does that make sense? Probably not, right?
Probably not. Yeah.
Even if you have 100 people, these types of people that really understand CMMC and have been involved in the ecosystem and know how to get you to the success of getting a 110 score in your audit, they're not, over there working at McDonald's. I mean, these are people that are
they're not just hiding in your HR department.
Right. No, You can't go ahead and, talk to your local recruiter and just pick somebody up as a temp and have them
No,
do that project. That's just not a reality.
no.
These are six-figure type individuals that are very educated. They understand the environment. They know how to do it. They know how to get you there.
Yeah.
Well, do you want to have that person for many, many years inside your organization? That's a judgment call. That's a business decision if you want to have that person embedded inside your organization for extended
Right.
years, right? So,
Yeah. So that's something to think about. That's like, the people that you're talking about, that process, it still goes through the 3 stages that we're talking about. There's that person's a part of the scoping and design. That person is a part of the implementation. That person is a part of the maintenance because they helped you do it all. So you're not just paying for that person for a short period of time.
right. Yeah.
You're
So let's say that let's say you even think, I'm a genius. I'm going to go ahead and get a contractor, someone that will have an agreed, they'll work for me full time for an extended period of time, and then they'll turn the keys over to us.
Mhm.
Okay. What we find is if you want to get it done in less than a year, you're probably going to need 2 people.
Yeah.
Why? All right. You need somebody focusing on architecture and design who's helping move the needle in implementing and building out the infrastructure. And then you need someone else who really understands the design of your documentation, how you operate as an organization, and make sure that your documentation, your procedures and policies match with how you're operating and they don't negatively impact your CMMC journey. So you've got to
Mm.
build
Yeah.
this document system that complies and works inside the design that you built.
Mhm.
Okay. And that's where, if you just bought a templated system and it doesn't line up with the design of what you're trying to do, you're going to have to be, ripping some stuff out and put some stuff in. And that takes time. That takes
Yeah.
a lot of time. And then that time for that person, that's an investment. Those people cost you money each month for you to have them on the payroll. And then they not only have to do that, they also have to train your staff to make sure that they're going to operate in that system once you have it done in the maintenance
Absolutely.
phase. So,
Yeah.
and when you start breaking those pieces apart about doing it yourself, it's a pretty serious commitment because the first thing that you're assuming you have is the knowledge to hire those people, the right
Mhm.
people, right? If I wanted to hire a physics major to teach college, I'm screwed. I don't know physics. I don't know math. I would not be able to appropriately qualify, quantify, and pick the right person for the job. I just don't have
That's
the
a great
skills.
point. Yeah, you know
And
nothing about physics.
I don't really know that. And if you don't know a whole lot about CMMC, picking that right person is going to be a real challenge. So how
Yeah.
could you get around that if you want to go with option A?
Mhm.
That's where having that relationship with that consultant that helped you did your design first, they could maybe help you pick that person or persons that you may want
Yeah.
to either have an extended contract with them or hire, because they're going to know what someone who understands looks like in that industry more than likely. So you could possibly engage someone to help you that, but don't do it on your own because there's no way you're going to get it right.
That's a great point. Something that I love that I've heard many of times is a good leader knows when somebody else can do something better than they
Yeah.
can.
Right.
So that's
So that's,
definitely
I think, do you feel like we covered option A?
I do. I do feel like, yeah, that was a really helpful way to break that out because both people have to go through all 3 of these phases of scoping and design, implementation and maintenance, but they're going to go through it very differently because one is going to have more on their back,
Right.
than the other.
So if you want to let's do some numbers of time and cost for
Okay.
that. So let's kind of split option A into 2 sections. Let's say that you want to organically bring someone along on the journey and you want to kind of like, I don't know, grow someone into that position to do it. You're looking at probably 2 years to pull that off because you're going to have to find the right person. You're going to have to find somebody who's really interested. You're going to have to send them to classes. The CCP courses are $4,000 or something. When you're trying to bring that person through that journey, it's going to take time. So you have to accommodate for their educational journey as they kind of get into the space, they go to do it. Maybe it's somebody who really likes security and has a passion for it. And you want to invest the time in them growing and learning and helping you move your company that way.
Mhm.
You're going to need at least a full-time person that's going to grow into that and really do it. At the same time, you're going to need probably a consultant to help that person along. to
Mm-hmm.
help inject. And it's going to take probably a year or two for you to really, more realistically, 2 years to pull that off. So trying to go that organic route of just throwing this at someone responsibility wise, let them kind of grow into it, that's a long-term commitment. It's just not very realistic, in my
Mm-hmm.
opinion. The other option would be, you contract someone. And I've seen other organizations do that. They go find someone that is a CCP. They contract them for 6 to 8 months, give them objectives that you want them to try to do. In those situations, even with a highly skilled person, you're still looking, if you want to get it done in less than a year, more than realistically 2 people. Because you've got to split the design and the project. Because if you want them to do the actual design and build of it, there's a lot of experience and knowledge they're going to have. Chances are, if you just bring on one person, you're going to have to find an outsourced organization that can do some of those project pieces, because it's just almost impossible to find one person that knows everything about all of that stuff to get it all done. So it's just like starting to open people's eyes to, like, if I'm going with option A, what am I looking down the barrel of?
Yeah.
Even if you bring a contract person on and they know a lot about CMMC, doesn't mean that they know how to stand up an Azure GCC high environment correctly.
Right.
So even if you did that, you're still going to have to probably find an outsourced company to get the physical implementation of it. So you're looking at well over 100,000, more realistically, somewhere around 200,000 in costs for the actual project piece to get you where you need to do of time and labor. And that doesn't even include licensing costs and other things that you have to do. So if we talk about option B next, option B is going to be, you're going to find an outsourced organization. Like, they're going to do all, if not most, of everything that you're going to need to do. So that's where you actually are going to carve up what needs to be done, and you're going to just give them those objectives to get done, and they're going to start knocking them out, building the design of it, implementing it. And those are a little easier to budget from the perspective of, you can get the scope of work from each of those as you're doing it, and you start to understand what your costs are as they're knocking those things out. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then you can start getting the needle moved with not as much effort from your staff. So that's where they're getting those pieces built out without you necessarily getting a ton of your staff consumed by that. But you still need to have someone who's going to be a representative, a point of contact for that organization, who's going to be working with those consulting companies, making sure that they're staying on task with the design of what you have outlined, and that you make sure that when they turn the keys over to what you have, it's what you were expecting, right?
Yeah. So it still kind of goes back to what you were saying with option A, where realistically it takes 2 people. Right. So that second person, technically, for option B has to be somebody inside of your organization that knows your organization.
Yeah, you're going to have a point of contact, but they're not going to be as responsible for the actual implementation of it. Like turning the dials and the knobs and switches. They're there to make sure that the vision is actually happening, but they're not really turning those knobs. Whereas in option A, they're active participant in doing a lot of those pieces. So in the option B, you're really just taking the big design that you have, and you're just carving it up into bite-sized chunks, and you're just doing them in projects. And that includes the architecture design, the documentation piece, and making sure they all combine together, and then having all those deliverables given back to you so that you do that. But now you've got that, right? That's when you kick into the maintenance piece. Like, what do you do after you now have this thing turned over to you?
It doesn't just all stop.
Right. So, and it's going to take somebody on staff a significant amount of time to make sure that maintenance piece. That's where you've got to really think about, well, would it be better to engage with a managed service company that is going to do those projects pieces, and they're going to be there for a maintenance piece to reduce our overhead of our labor consumption inside our staff, right? Because if you got Sally or Bob and they're doing your estimating, but they also get 80% of their day is tied up with just CMMC things, even if you don't want them to do that because you don't have, the sight or vision to see what that's going to do to that person, and you want them to have a lot of responsibilities around that CMMC engagement, it's going to tie them up quite a bit. So that's where, if you go with option B, you want to think about what that consulting company is going to do, not only to get you ready and get you what you need, but moving forward, how are they going to help make sure that what you need is going to be a continuous maintenance process, that you're not going to just doom one of your staff members to 80% of their day for the rest of
Yeah.
their life
Right.
to be doing that. Or is the company that you're engaging with going to do that?
Mm.
Right? Are they going to do that maintenance piece? So that's where the shared matrix really comes into play, of really
Yes.
understanding who's going to take the assumption responsibilities of those maintenance pieces.
Yes. And we talked literally just our last episode was about asking the questions to an MSP, that consultant
Right.
piece, to make sure that you're picking the right one. I do have a specific question about that process, though. That person inside of the organization that would be working with that consultant outside of the organization, what are your thoughts about, do they need to have any sort of education? Do you think, would you recommend them to know something, go through some sort of course? What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the person that you're going to make the point of contact, depending on how you want to gauge, you want to think about how much time do you want that person to be allocated to that responsibility of CMMC.
Mm-hmm.
If you're like, I only want them to spend a few hours a week on it. If that's the case, do you really want to spend a lot of time on that person being pretty well-educated, well-rounded around CMMC? That's where you start really having to lean into your consultant that you're going to have on a maintenance continuous process, a managed service provider, or a consultant that you're going to have that engagement with for many years to come. That's where you could possibly slide that across the table and say, these are the types of things that we need you to do. We'll handle some basic change control processes that we have to hand over to you. We'll handle background checks. We'll handle doing some things like the camera controls or other types of things. They could take a much smaller subsection of those pieces and not have to have such a responsibility burden. But that's where the design, you kind of have to think about, how are you going to hash that up, right? That's where the shared matrix kind of comes into play. If you want that person to consume a much larger piece of that puzzle in the maintenance responsibility, absolutely, they need to get education. They need to really dive into learning, and I would start off with CCP. Yeah, that's where I would kind of like, first, how much time do I want him to spend? If I want him to, if I want him to eat a lot more of the CMMC pie, then definitely send him down the education piece.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's good to know. And so, really, the moral of the story is this CMMC journey is going to cost a lot. But the options that we just said, option A or option B, option A is definitely going to cost a company more than option B, would you say?
I think so. And you think to yourself, wait a minute, I just hired the people. Wouldn't it be cheaper than it would be to just kind of, pay for these higher priced organizations to just outsource that responsibility? I don't think so. I think when you take the cost of hiring those people and stretching it across a year to two time, and you look at all the effort and cost that's going to get you there, I think doing a targeted outsourced solution of getting you ready for CMMC is probably the best bet for you, unless you're well north of 100 people. Like you really are a much larger company, and you need to have full-time staff and build your own IT infrastructure and your own IT department that are doing those types of things. And to be honest with you, you should already have that in place, right?
Yeah.
If you're of that size, you should probably already have that. Now you're just talking about, well, how can we use the people that we've got, and what do we might need to do to move our organization in a safer direction to do that? That's a different conversation.
Yeah. Well, that's a conversation that we're going to have later, because that really goes into time, right? Because we're gonna then start talking about, okay, if you already have some of those people and they're on your staff, but that's still going to cost some kind of money, because that's going to cost their time, which is your money, right? So it goes into another lane that we'll be talking about later more in detail.
I'm looking forward to that one. But let's kind of close the book on that last piece of maintenance. We sort of talked about it early, and we said, hey, look, it's if you're well designed and like set up as an organization, if you've got good patching processes, if you've got the good updates, you've got good change control processes, those types of things, you've got those things in place already, but you're not really tackling CMMC yet. you could take your budget that you have for your 365 and other types of services and your IT budget that you have. If you multiply that times 3, you're going to be within probably the ballpark of what you're looking at potentially cost-wise. Could be 2, could be 4 times what you're paying. It just depends on the maturity level of your organization and where you're at when you start.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which we can't answer that. We're not all knowing.
You can't, but it does give you a general idea of where you can kind of, put your thumb in the air and go, okay, that doesn't sound great, or that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
And the reason why I wanted to talk about the maintenance piece is you need to have someone who is going to be responsible for generating the evidence after you've built the system.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's pretend, Kaleigh, that I give you a perfectly designed CMMC ecosystem. I've got the documents, the policies, the procedures, the architecture, all of that. I've got it ready. But I don't have any evidence. It's not going to pass.
Yeah.
Because the auditor needs to be able to say, okay, did you have a change control system? Well, show me your change control process. Show me how you went through it. Well, I have this policy here, but you never did it. You haven't done it. You haven't actually completed any of that.
For the Gen Z people listening, we like to call that the receipts.
Okay. All right.
Show me the receipts.
Show me the receipts.
We would say.
I feel so educated now.
That's the one part that I can bring to this table.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
The translator today for Gen Z will be Kaleigh Floyd. So, you've got to really think about building that evidence. So that person is not only maintaining the basic checklist of things that have to happen, they have to do the fastidious, diligent work of keeping the evidence and putting it in a way that as you've built this system and spent the time and money to get it done, that you're now building the evidence that's going to help you pass. Right? This is, I tell you, it is the red zone of the end zone when it comes to football. Like, so many people will focus on the design, they'll get there, and they will not put it in the end zone because they just can't get the evidence process
that's a great point.
going. They just, what typically the failure is they built the design, but they haven't translated to the people to understand that this is how they need to operate so they can, as they're operating, build the evidence for you. Right? So as they go about doing their business the way they're supposed to be doing it, they should be building the evidence and you're collecting it. So that's the first challenge with the maintenance piece that you need to think about. Is doing that, right? Building that evidence over time that you have to stay on top of and make sure that you're doing that. And that's either, if you're outsourcing to some other company, they need to be making sure they're tracking the evidence and the stuff that is on your plate that you have to be doing.
It still needs to be happening. It's either option A or option B. Yeah.
Absolutely.
No, for sure.
And the last piece, a lot of times people don't think about this for the maintenance piece, is as you're coming into, after you've completed the design, you have the capital expenses, the other project pieces that you had to do. How are you going to return on investment? How are you going to take this whole CMMC journey that you've just done, you put it in the end zone, everybody's high-fiving, you do your little end zone dance, and then how are you going to take that cost and apply that to the different bids that you might be doing, or the services you're going to be providing to clients, or whatever that might be? You need to be thinking about, now that I've gotten to the end zone, how do I recoup this cost? How do I look at the maintenance piece and inject that into our costs that we have so that we are making sure that we are getting the right margins moving forward? And that's something that a lot of people, I think, don't necessarily always think about as they're starting that journey. But you really want to be eye on the prize that once we get to the end zone, how can we amortize that across our costs to make sure that we're making the margins for the part that we're building or whatever it is that you're doing?
Yeah. You definitely do need to make money. This isn't all just for funsies, right?
Right.
Anything else that you want to talk about specifically when it comes to cost in the scoping and design, implementation, or maintenance pieces?
Yeah, when you start looking at that return of investment, that's where tracking that cost is so critical.
Oh,
right? As you're going through, you want to look at the project piece, the maintenance piece, and all that, and you start tallying that number, because most organizations that are really successful, they're used to knowing how to do that on a normal basis of how they operate. They just need to take that and follow the knowledge that they have and implement that back into the costs that they're having. And that's not a lot of things that people talk about when it comes about maintenance, because they just assume businesses know how to do the business things. But a lot of times I think organizations are put under such pressure to get CMMC done that they don't necessarily always think about that. Right.
Wow. Yeah.
And some of those contracts can take a period of time, right, to
Mm-hmm.
get priced out. You may not have included all those costs that you think you might have, but you already have those contracts out. So you need to kind of think about kind of that queue time and the hopper that you have to do, and how you want to space that out, so that then you can kind of pick the time. Okay, I want to get certified now at this point.
Yeah.
And I'm going to take this cost, I'm going to drag this across.
Mm-hmm.
And then, as we're bidding here, we're going to start raising our costs to accommodate for this piece, because these are the things that you sort of want to be tracking, so that you can go ahead and recoup those costs for CMMC. And now a lot of people are hoping that they might be able to get some grants and other things. Not really an expert about that, but I think there might be some in different state and local governments that might help in some of those areas. I've heard some people say in Texas and other places have been able to get some.
That's interesting.
Some funding and some other things, especially for SMBs.
Okay. Yeah, that's really helpful. The more we talk about this subject of time, getting real about time, I'm getting more excited about the next ones too. It's like a little hidden piece that I'm ready to unlock, kind of thing.
Yeah, and me and Adam are actually going to be doing a podcast that's going to be coming out. We're going to be talking about how do you know when you're ready, and the time that's going to be involved in knowing when you're ready. That was, this is based on our experience of what we did, and it's not freaking easy. Let me tell you, it's tough.
Yeah. No, I'm excited for that one too. I'm sure Adam's got those nuggets of wisdom that are just going.
He's chomping at the bit to get going.
He's ready. He's ready to talk about it. He just went through it, and he's ready to talk about it. I'm sure you are too.
I'm gonna do a Gen Z term here. He's got the tea.
Wow, he's got the tea. I love that.
Right? Did I say that right?
Yeah, I love it. That's great.
I feel so Gen Z.
There is going to be a part of this podcast where I realize that I am now getting old, and that is just unfortunate.
Well, we have in the wings Cassie, my daughter, so we can step her in. And at this point, you've sat in so many CMMC discussions, you probably could just move over to the engineer spot, and she can take over hosting.
I won't promise any title change at this moment, but okay. We'll see. I love it. Well, thank you, Bobby, for being real about the cost as much as we can. Again, we do not own the CMMC Bible, and we are not CMMC Jesus. So this is just our perspective on this topic.
So don't troll us.
Yeah, please. I'm begging you. I can't take much. Yeah. So I just hope that our journey and what we've learned will help you guys as much as we can. And, we want to hear from you. So if you have anything to add, questions, comments, your opinions on, where your company's at through it, we'd love to hear your journeys. Please share it with us either on LinkedIn, on YouTube, in the comments section, and make sure to, like our podcast and follow it, just so that you're notified anytime we post a new video. But just remember, Thursdays are the Climbing Mount CMMC days. So we'll promise a podcast every Thursday. We're here for you. We hope you guys enjoyed today's Let's Get Real About Cost podcast, and make sure to look out for the next one on Let's Get Real. And I believe the next one is actually going to be talking about time, which I'm very excited about. So be on the lookout for that one. We hope you guys enjoyed sitting down with us today, and make sure to keep on climbing. Bye, guys. Make sure to follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube to stay up to date on the latest CMMC news. We hope you guys enjoyed today's episode, and listen out for the next one. But until then, keep on climbing.